arrived yet, but we'll just have them come in because we don't want to shorten our time that we have with you today and with these wonderful panelists that we've gathered and who have so graciously agreed to be part of this discussion. My name is Brenda Ledley. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Executive Director here at the Lions. And before we begin anything, first I want to welcome you, of course, and acknowledge that we are on the unceded territorial ancestral lands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and to encourage all of us to do whatever we can to move reconciliation forward. I had the great pleasure to see David Diamond's piece, Home. Can't pronounce the word, but anybody be able to pronounce it?
Shwa'amet.
Shwa'amet. And I was, really clarified for me how much work we have to do. Us, non-native people, we have so much work to do to even begin, real reconciliation. So I really encourage you to get involved in that process as much as you can. So we are here today with this wonderful youth panel. As we know, artistic and creative expression has been proven to be central to the health of young people and to their maturation and their identity formation and their ability to transform into responsible, good people as they get older. The way we're going to do it today is I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then we have some questions for them that we're going to ask them, and so we'll let them speak about their questions, and then at about 4 o'clock we're going to open it up to you guys so you can ask questions that you have. And then at 4:30 we're going to break and we're going to have a reception. So we have some, nice smoked salmon and some cheese and stuff, and we have $4 glasses of wine and beer. So stick around and you can network and schmooze and do whatever. We'd love to have you stay. So to begin with, I'm going to introduce, I have them completely backwards in my panel, but let's begin with Brandon Yan here on my left. Brandon Yan is the Education Director for Out on Screen, a nonprofit arts organization with the mission to illuminate, celebrate, and advance queer people through film, education, and dialogue. As an energetic community advocate, he has led Out on Screen's Out in Schools program since 2015, and over the last year, Out in Schools has not only seen a dramatic increase in the number of requests for its student programming, but also for workshops, specifically targeting educators and administrators in BC's education systems. He has collaborated with the Ministry of Education, BC Teachers Federation, UBC Faculty of Education, and the ARC Foundation to address this immediate need to support LGBTQ+ students through policies and practices that foster inclusive school environments. Keeps getting longer. Additionally, Out on Screen also produces the Vancouver Queer Film Festival, about to celebrate its 30th anniversary. Vancouver Queer Film Festival has a long history of engaging young people through its programming. So welcome, Brandon. And then next to him we have Kim Harvey. Kim. Kim comes from and I could be saying this wrong, so feel free to correct me, comes from the Salix Chilcotin, the Kootenai.
You do it and then I'll follow.
Okay.
I love it.
So
Salix is good.
Chilcotin,
Kootenai.
and Dakelj.
Yeah, and so it's Chilcotin, which is the colonial version is Chilcotin.
Okay.
And Silk is Okanagan.
Thank you. And she is a director, playwright, and actor. She has worked across Canada. Highlights include the national tour of Kevin Loring's play, Where the Blood Mixes, and the world premiere of Corey Payette's Children of God at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. Kim is working on her first commissioned play, Kamloopa, and was shortlisted for the 2017 Gina Wilkinson Prize for her work as an emerging female director. She participated in the 2017 Fall Banff residency, Writing in a Racialized Canada, and is currently investigating her relationship to her ancestors and deepening her understanding of her Indigenous storytelling history. Kim is extremely invested in community and youth engagement and has worked on the Mayor's Task Force for Mental Health and Addiction and the City of Vancouver's Urban Aboriginal Peoples Advisory Committee. As the Youth Program Manager at the Cultch, she spearheaded the Indigenous Youth Initiative, which focused on increasing urban Indigenous youth people's artistic opportunities in Metro Vancouver. More recently, Kim was appointed as one of 2 artists to take part in the National Theatre School's inaugural Artistic Leadership Program, which aims to steward the next generation of artistic leaders of major artistic institutions in Canada. Wouldn't that be nice?
I'm coming for all your jobs.
Yeah. And then next to her we have Rika Pavanatharaja.
Yeah, you got it.
Hey. For the past 8 years, Rika has dedicated her career to the creative sector in cultivating the role of the arts for young people. While attending SFU, where she acquired her BA in sociology, it's a little far removed, but you know, we understand how that happened. She began to understand how art and culture are integral to creating sustainable, healthy, and thriving societies. In 2010, she joined the dynamic team at Art Starts, a charitable organization all about expanding the role of the art in education for young people, and was able to apply her passion for building community through the arts. Today, as the Director of Engagement and Development, she is excited to collaborate and advocate with the arts community to explore what's possible for young people when the arts are considered essential in society. Yeah, that would be nice. And finally, we have, on my far left, we have Samantha Knott. Samantha is Cree-Métis, originally from northeastern British Columbia. Her Métis community is located in Alacrosse, Saskatchewan. Samantha joined the Bill Reid Gallery in 2015 as the education coordinator. She graduated from the University of BC with a BA in First Nations and Indigenous Studies and Political Science.
Word.
With a background in youth peer support through volunteer work and involvement with the Native Youth Sexual Health Network, Samantha brings Indigenous and grassroots perspectives to educating. She is actively working to create accessible programming that is by and for Indigenous and marginalized communities. Samantha is passionate about creating educational experiences that bridge the gaps between people while hoping to plant seeds of social change in her students. In addition to being an educator, she is also a published writer, currently working on her first book. So welcome to all of you. We're so thrilled to have you here. Hey. I know it's a challenge, you know, for all of us working in this sector to engage younger people in our activities. Well, maybe not for all of us. So we've got some questions that we're going to put to the panelists, and I think what I'm going to say is, you know, we won't sort of go in any order. We'll just jump in if you want to, and you know, have a turn if you want to, and we'll go from there. So the very first question we have is, what does it mean to engage young people in the arts in 2018? Who'd like to go with that one? What does it mean to engage young people in the arts in 2018? Big question.
I'll start, and I'll just start here in the sense that I think it's our responsibility. I think it's absolutely necessary and vital. For me, being an Indigenous person, it's about stewardship. You know, I really work by the principle that we don't borrow the land from our ancestors. We don't inherit it from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So for me, the idea of creating a better landscape in the artistic community than what I've inherited is pivotal to the choices that I make. The way that I work as an artist is my artistic achievements, my professional development, and then community and youth engagement. And so that is a part of my responsibility of being an artist, and I feel very passionate around that. Specifically, if you are a community member, an artist who accepts publicly funded dollars, I think there is a fiduciary responsibility to have programming and have the capability, or at least have the understanding of where your positions intersect with all facets of the community, whether or not you do or do not, where do you fit within the ecology. If you don't have the capacity, are you looking to get it? If you do, how are you doing it? But for me, as a value as being an Indigenous person, it is inherent, it is an embodiment, it is absolutely my responsibility to understand how to steward in young people into the knowledge that I've been given. It's a privilege to be given knowledge. It's a privilege to be given opportunities, and it would go at everything against who I am if I didn't create space in my life to engage with young people, to share the knowledge. It's a cyclical process. So for me, it's not even separate. It's woven into the fabric of who I am and how I work. To me, and I think it has to be.
Great.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Who'd like to follow that?
Sure, I can take a crack at it.
Thanks for
So when I was thinking about this question, I approach it in the context of education, because that's where so much of my time is spent. And Art Starts as an organization, we're really looking to question and address sort of the current landscape of how arts are perceived in our community. And one of the things that we are, as an organization, moving towards is shifting the perception culturally that art is extra and art is siloed. And so and this starts because young people, we have to start changing the way young people value and see art. And we're looking at it from the context of education. And so it's so important. We've been hearing a lot about how the future of young people is reliant on creativity and innovation and empathy, and those are the skills that are learned through the arts. And so much research really talks about that. And so that's exactly where we're shifting, and we're not doing this alone, we're doing it with everybody in the community to work towards a society and a culture where the arts are integrated and integral to learning, and it starts at education because that's where it's accessible at such a young age.
Thank you.
Great answers, Jeez. And I think a huge thing that we take into our program at the gallery and what it means to engage youth in art is the interconnectedness of all things. The interconnectedness between people, land, and art, especially within Indigenous communities, is really integral. And like Kim was saying, I also feel a responsibility as myself and as an Indigenous person to make sure that I'm doing my best to educate youth, because youth will be the knowledge holders once we're old and gone, right? So, and it's in my community's teaching that you gotta support the youth because they are literally our future. And so I don't look at so much as engaging youth in art, it's engaging youth in knowledge keeping and transference. And so, because you can't get art without the people, and the art we have in the Bill Reid Gallery is all about the communities along the Northwest Coast. And so bringing in youth and bringing in youth that are Indigenous to the Northwest Coast is really important as well, because it's also capacity building and a way to help build pride in cultures. Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Nessa.
I think I'll just add, when I think about the question around youth engagement in 2018, the specific time and context that we're in, the importance of art to things like democracy and our political climate that we're in. And the way that what my Out in Schools program works is we bring LGBTQ films into schools to talk about other social issues. So we actually show a bunch of short films, and we ask the young people, how did that make you feel? And so we connect with them on a visceral human level about just feeling. Did it make you feel sad, happy? And then we decode that and like, well, what do you think about these things in media that we see, policies, certain things that relate to them in their school environment. And so as young people today, we have unlimited access to information everywhere. A lot of us do anyways. And so what is my role as education director? And it's to invite them in, but also to curate a specific experience for them as well. So when I think about the film festival, film festivals have to change with the times. Like when you have Netflix and OutTV Go, and you can get films faster than you can secure the rights to them for a festival. Like our closing gala film last year was on Netflix before our closing gala happened. And that was frustrating. But it's the reality, right? And so what do you get from that experience that you don't get at home? And for the LGBTQ community, it's actually being around people who are laughing and crying with you. It's that connectivity to other human beings that sometimes we lose in how fast digital culture is moving. And that's something against digital culture, because I think it's a tool like anything else, and it's just how we use it to create those experiences today. Yeah.
Wow. What a bunch of smarty pants, eh? Okay. Anybody want to say anything else that hasn't been said about that particular question before we move on?
I think why I keep engaging with youth in 2018 in the arts, because Brian, to contextualize it, I think that's a great point, is the fact that my concerns right now are with our young people and their ability to do exactly what the both of you were saying about those life skills of empathy, of critical thinking, of engagement, of community, of really understanding how this correlates to you as a human. And I think for me, like I say, and Gideon at NTS hates when I say this, I have no loyalty to theater. I just think theater is one of the most powerful tools to move people. I tried doing it in government, I tried doing it in policy, I tried doing it with nonprofits, and for me, as a woman, as an Indigenous woman, I have the most agency and I have the most power in theater. And it's the quickest modality for me to move people in today's day and age. I just think art is the strongest tool for those things to happen. And believe you me, I have tried in governance, but when it takes 8 weeks to sign out 6 balloons, I can't do that. So to me, it's the agency and the urgency of us being able to be nimble and responsive to where young people are at today. But also, I agree with Brandon enormously. It's the getting in the room together. Theater for me is an ancient practice. It's an undeniable feeling when you have a living, human, breathing thing in front of you. And to me, there's something really extraordinary that happens in the gathering of art. And I think that's the advantage. We're all very capable of the death of the public life, of us going into our apartments and homes and doing everything in the privacy, of us really not engaging in community, and that terrifies me. I'm really terrified. And I think that terror, but also optimism, knowing that it is a strong modality, is what compels me to keep working in the arts today. So at 2018 today, is that I think it's the strongest medium. I think it's the most compelling.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you all. So let's move on to question number 2. What do youth expect from a cultural experience? Number 1 part. Second part, and how can we connect them with this experience in a way that is organic and meaningful to them? So I'll say it one more time. What do youth expect from a cultural experience, and how can we connect them with this experience in a way that is organic and meaningful? Anybody want to leap on that one?
Sure.
Rika.
I think that young people don't give them enough credit. They want to, especially today, diversity is really important and at the forefront, and they want to see themselves reflected in the artists that they work with and the art forms that are available, and diversity in all forms. And that is experienced in an organic way through arts integrated learning. So it's not just a one-off per se, but it's rather, and this is something that I've seen, where some art forms that are integrated into the classroom, or experiences that are more long-term, have the ability to sort of infiltrate and really resonate with young people. And we see this in some of the schools that are now available. The school that comes to mind when I was thinking about this was, it's a school called Abbotsford Integrated, it's Asia, Abbotsford School of Integrated Arts. And it's a school that is 100% arts-based. All of their educators have an art practice. They are able to deliver all the core competencies of the BC curriculum.
Wow.
And they do it all within various art forms. But the key thing that they do different is the way in which they teach it. And so the idea of learning about reconciliation through photography, that is something that is so amazing, and it's possible when the arts are integrated into the learning experience. And so that's the sort of context that I could speak to in terms of thinking about what they expect, what they'd like to see, and how the arts can transpire in an organic manner rather than just this one-off experience.
I'm also just gonna add to that, you know, in the question in terms of what's different today than say from what youth expected, you know, 20 years ago. You know, just to keep that in, I mean, you probably don't know.
Like even for me, it's like when the Indigenous support worker, which was that kind of like the Aboriginal support worker, who, Jesus, they had difficult jobs back then, would pull you out of classroom during a critical course and go make dream catchers with you, or force you to make bannock, or talk to you about teepees, and it would be like, me and my sisters were some of the only Indigenous people at our school, and so like my mother had to be like, stop ostracizing them. This is not their culture. This has nothing to do with being like a silk teen or silk woman. You are not even that. So like my mom just stopped us. It was like they need to live. So that to me, like and that was I graduated. So Brent and I went to high school together. We had seen each other.
We were actually in a play together.
So in Langley, and that was in 2003. And so for me, like, I'm sure you can speak to the radical difference of the way arts and culture integrated into the classroom, which we always have room to grow. But for me, like, hearing young people, the way they even speak about the content, I know that the Ministry of Education this last year went through a huge rehaul of integrating Indigenous curriculum throughout their entire courses, which I was really elated to hear. But for me, like that, the difference is also the education available for all of us as workers and people who engage with young people, that the resources online are incredible. Like if we had that like 10, 15, 20 years ago, like literally I say Google is one of the smartest Indians I know. Like they have so much power to go and start that learning process that just was not available. So for me, it's also when you are able to start these conversations to then say, go to the TRC recommendations, go to the nativeland.ca website, go to all these organizations, look up these schools that are doing the Bill Reid Gallery, Anya, that are doing so many incredible things. That just for me, like it just wasn't there when I was younger at all. It was you were privileged if you had an elder to speak to or an artist of excellence to speak to, but now you can YouTube all that stuff. Like I think the entry points and the doorways are far greater. It doesn't, it absolutely doesn't take over the fact that we still need people going into the classrooms, but it's that ease of access, which I think is radically different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would also add around, you were saying about like, I mean, whenever I try to curate or create something for young people, and it's weird because like I'm 31, so it's like, it's not that far gone, depending on who you talk to. And when I go into an experience in any kind of arts and cultural event or whatever, that's what I want for a young person. Like I have high expectations, and they should also have high expectations. And so when I go into a school and I want to show a bunch of short films and talk about sexuality and gender, if I'm bored, they're bored. If they're not interested, I'm like, I'm not interested. And so I'm trying to create an experience where I can put myself back into that place of being in a classroom or in an auditorium or a gymnasium of 500 other kids. And if I'm not engaged in it, then like, why bother? Because some teachers, like, they'll sign people up for these things, and they're all forced to be there. But they're all not forced to be bored. And so trying to engage with them on a real level, and that's why our facilitators are all younger people. I'm the oldest of our cohort. And I think that kind of peer-to-peer messaging really works well in classrooms and in schools. And we also did a filmmaking project we've been doing for a few years called Troublemakers, where we pair young LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ+ elders. And so it's an intergenerational filmmaking project, and so the youngest person we had last year was like 13, and one of the oldest is like 29. But the 13-year-old, when we went to the closing circle on that, like, I'm not gonna cry, but that closing circle, that young person was like, this is the first time I've been taken seriously. Like I came in wanting to learn how to make a film, and no one babied me. And that was really, really important to them, that they came into this not knowing, like, not expecting that that's how it was gonna be, which saddens me a bit, but that they got something really meaningful out of it because they were taken seriously as an artist. And so at the festival, when those young people make a film, we give them artist passes because they're artists. And you know, previous iterations of this program, because it relies on grant funding, the first budget, I was going through it because I had to recreate it, and the first budget was like, we're going to give the elders $500 and the youth get nothing. And I'm like, no, not my watch. Because it's like, yeah, I mean, they're both spending their time and they're there with us, and I want to be able to treat their time respectfully. And just because someone is an elder, we should respect our elders, but also understand that these young people are also putting actually way more time into creating something. And so the second year was like 500 and 150, and this year I'm like still waiting for BC Arts Council. And hopefully we'll be paying them equally this year, because it's just one of those things where again, intentionally, if you're gonna welcome youth as artists, that you're gonna treat them as such as well.
Yeah, and I really echo that. I think youth at the most just want to be respected. And when they walk into a space, like if they come into the gallery, they're anxious, they're out of the classroom, I'm just like this weird person, they have no idea how old I am, they're like, are you 16, are you 95, I don't know. And so they're really uncomfortable and they expect me to just teach them about art, when really I want to hear what they have to say about the art. And I think giving youth the space to really show how amazing and smart and rad they are is really what draws them in. And especially the peer-to-peer working with youth is great, and that's what the Native Youth Sexual Health Network does, is we work, it's a youth network, and it's all youth run, and it just really shows that how amazing youth are. And I don't think there's enough time that's taken out of people's days to really acknowledge that, and there's no space for youth to feel that. Because they do feel baby, they do feel like they're just constantly put, and there's so many boundaries and categories and rules and everything. But when you come in a space and you're like, you know what, I want to hear from you, I want to hear all the really cool things you do, I want to hear your opinions, let me know now. They're just like, cool, I'm on it. And also just meeting them where they're at, because obviously different youth have different accessibilities. But doesn't matter their backgrounds or their income level or who they are, they still have really cool things to say, and just like reminding you that they're powerful and they're smart and they're great. I think it's what really gets them into the galleries, into the programs, into the arts, for sure.
I think too, for me, it's like recently there's been like a real influx in the last few years of, and I were briefly talking about this around the funds available for youth in the arts and the engagement of young people, and I'm really elated to see that our cultural institutions are supporting those programs. What really frightens me, because this is where I think sometimes I have read grants or sat on juries or consulted with institutions where there's a real lack of excellency or expertise in terms of doing youth programming. Being a youth doesn't make someone be able to actually engage with young people. Not necessarily. There are very capable, trained, excellent youth workers who happen to be young, but those are not one and the same things. That I see sometimes organizations who are just saying, we're just going to hire a young person to do some young things and have some like incredibly high expected outcomes and deliverables. And I just read that and I say, this is actually dangerous. Because for me, around expectations, the expectations is that we're supposed to provide safe environments for them. That's the expectation. They come in extra vulnerable. And there's something really beautiful about that, about the level of vulnerability that they come into a space with. And we have to be so careful and thoughtful with what we do with that. And I'm sure you can speak to this, because if it is one of their first experiences, if we do it and execute it poorly, it's going to be their last. So I take the safety of the young people very, very seriously, and I am rigorously, I'm the mean one in the room when I start reading these youth grants, and I say, who the hell would allow this? Who in what world would think this is a good idea? For the safety of the young people, I cannot support this in any way. Who's the expert in the field? Where are the consults? Where's the meaningful relationship building? Where is the actual work? It is not an event-based sector. It's relationship-based. And to me, that's the expectation. And you'll get organic, you'll get meaningful after that. But for me, I was speaking with Alan and Nancy at YPT, the Young People's Theatre Toronto, and they're seeing similar trends out there as well. But it really undermines like institutions that do this so well for so many years. Like RPD is like the oldest theater in Toronto, and then we see other institutions just pick up youth work, just decide to do youth engagement. And for me, beyond being that really, I feel like ignorant and naive, I think it's irresponsible, and I'm concerned about the young people's safety.
Right.
We all see that, right? Like it's to me, it's like our own due diligence. I protected, these are our young people. These are the people who are gonna take over, and we need to fiercely protect them. And I think it's also the apathy and empathy thing too, or the lack of empathy, or I feel like as adults we forget how vulnerable it is to show up sometimes, and I'm really interested in this and that, like, like what courage everyone took to come here to be today and be vulnerable and open to learning, and the care that I feel like we all took in coming here, and we apply that sometimes to young people, but we have to be very rigorous with them, and I'm trying to apply it a lot in the work that I do with adults, because I feel like the principles for meaningful, authentic, and ethical engagement for young people are the same for adults. We just don't apply them. We just think we're all so tough. We're not tough.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Very, very, very interesting. I know that this idea of students being forced to be put in a situation has been part of the legacy of, arts education in school, and it's given us a bad rap, because people, like you say, have one bad experience and they don't want to go back. So it's so important.
This Gideon Arthurs, he's the executive director, CEO at NTS. He says, I don't believe, people say theater's not powerful. Theater's one of those powerful things, because you'll have one person see a bad piece of theater and say, I'm never going to theater again. That's power. We have power, right? You can see a bad movie and you'll go back to a movie, but if you see one piece of bad theater, you're never returning.
That's right.
For a lifetime.
And the irony is that same piece of theater for another person might be the best piece of theater they've ever seen and be very meaningful to them. So it's a mysterious and wonderful experience.
And I'm interested in this, like, the aftercare. Like I see, and I've seen some youth programs, and I've seen some artistic institutions do it. Is the beyond the email, thank you for coming. But like, how can we make sure? I'm calling this like the beyond the proscenium. Like, who's responsible, and how do we hold each other accountable for acts of potentially violence and oppressive culture that you endured when you were participating in something? And I don't have the answers for that one. I've thought about, the Arts for Alliance, the BC Arts Council, the Canada Council, our arts minister. Like, what are the metrics for quality assurance in youth engagement? Who are we holding people accountable for when they get a grant and harm young people and then get another grant? How do we actually, and I'm not even saying whistleblowing, because I think there's a good impulse there, but that deeply concerns me.
I think it speaks to how just deeply institutionalized arts organizations are, and how much we forget in instances when we're applying for grants, when we're dealing with boards, when, I don't know, you have to do some weird thing in your meetings where someone has to second what you say just for it to get written down on paper. Not better, it's fine. To really look at that, examine what we're doing, and realize that we're not working in a way that fosters community. We're not working in ways that we are keeping each other accountable. We look at each other as kind of like our own ships in the sea, when really that's not what it is. And I think just the entire institution of how arts organizations are built really is counterproductive to supporting youth in a way that is holistic, accountable, and safe. And so I also don't have the answer for that, but it's
And also
really
decision
frustrating.
makers.
Yeah.
I still see people coming in with heavy-handed grants that have every detail organized, and I'm like, where's the youth voice? Where's the consultation? How do we know they're even going to want to do this? This is why you get low turnouts, because you haven't even met with a young person yet. And the program in the latter part of my career was, we sat with the youth and said, yo, what do you want to do? And then wrote the grant from there. But I still see grants written by the ED, written by the youth person, with no consults. And then we give them $60,000, and then we get the final report talking about how it didn't work. Come on.
Very good. Ooh, okay, I'm going to move on to question number 3. How do we ensure that our programming reflects the diversity of young people and their realities? I know this was already mentioned about, people have, Rika, you said it, it's very important that people see themselves in the work, or on the stage, or in the orchestra, or in the galleries. So how can we ensure that it reflects diversity? What do people need to do to make sure that that diversity is there?
I can just quickly speak to just organizationally, if that diversity isn't within the organization, it is so hard to do it in your work. And so that's everything from who you hire, who you contract to, the services you use.
The services.
Yeah, like it's literally like for our like we use the Vinners Project instead of some rando like recycling company. It's about the choices you make with the values that you're supposed to live. And so for an organization like Out on Screen, thinking about queer, trans, two-spirit communities and how it's been traditionally portrayed in film and media, and bringing the alternative into classrooms, right? It's not Brokeback Mountain only. It's not like Boys Don't Cry. It's like you know how hard it is to find a short film with a diverse cast that's good and like friendly for schools about queer and trans two-spirit issues.
I was like, yes, no, not the last bullet point.
And it's like one of those things that as an adult who is making the choices of what to show young people, I take it very seriously, right? And sometimes I'll show them older works because I haven't found a newer work that kind of replaces it. And I have to explain like, yes, it's old, they're using clip-ons, bear with me. And yeah, I mean, we have those conversations too. Like young people are super smart. Like you want to have a conversation about race and gender, talk about Star Wars. Talk about Black Panther, and they'll tell you everything you need to know. Like one 5th grader, we asked like, why is it that like girls can wear pants and hoodies and boys can't wear skirts? And she just said the patriarchy, and I'm like,
They're so far ahead of us.
Yeah.
It's inspiring.
yeah, and it's anyway. But yeah, so when we see that the organization is diverse, you see that reflected in their work as well, and then you see young people tune in as well. I think, and that's just fun.
Cool. I echo what you say and can add that I think you ensure diversity by design. So that's something that like we have addressed more and more head on, meaning that it's not an afterthought. It's something that we intentionally, as an organization, incorporate into, like you said, the staff, the artists that we engage, ensuring that there's a diverse roster, the programming which is reflective, and then ensuring that it's made accessible to the communities that it's hoping to serve. So I think that's really something that we've tried to incorporate as much as possible, to really not have it as an afterthought and have it as in the design, because I think that's where we have the control to ensure that we can make sure that that's translated in the work that's being experienced by young people.
I think too, like what you said earlier too, that youth want to see themselves. And I'm kind of in a funny position in the gallery because yes, I'm Indigenous, but I'm also a visitor to these lands. And so I'm Cree Métis teaching about Northwest Coast in what's considered a pretty Haida-centric art gallery. Okay. And so I think for me a huge part of what I do and what kind of ensures diversity for the youth coming in and really engages Indigenous youth is that I make sure that when I'm running a program, it's not my voice. There's stories that are from the art that aren't from my people. There's stories in these lands that I don't have the rights to tell and I shouldn't tell. And it's up to me as a facilitator and the programmer to make sure that I'm building capacity and supporting the artists, the elders, and community leaders that can tell those stories, that can teach the kids that. And I think when youth see that you're putting in that work to make sure that you're not always telling the story, that you have found somebody that maybe they know they're comfortable, they're safe with, that is telling that story. Like you have their uncle in there, that happens all the time. They have their auntie, it's someone they know from their own community. Really, really helps. That's what
I think just to add is the rigor around building all of our capacities, doing our own professional development all of the time to understand where young people are currently at. I get really annoyed when I'm like, oh, I'm just not a young person, I won't understand. If you were in any other sector, that would not be acceptable. You are demanded to be excellent all of the time, and when we go back to expectations, like when I would hire people who are like, they deserve and we should demand of ourselves excellency to to know how we can do introductions to make sure that non-binary people feel comfortable, to understand we get a person who's disabled and walks through our building and checks out what are the potential challenges that they may have. Like the rigorous capacity building for ourselves as practitioners is something that I'm deeply invested in, and I truly respect people who continue to go because they move like this, so we have to be just as fast as them. I think it's a really bad trope for the sector to just say like, oh, I don't know those references, or sorry, I didn't use the proper pronouns, or what. Would be unacceptable in a different sector.
I try to use pop culture references, and sometimes I'm just like,
Right?
oh.
Like, know what your strengths are. I like stop doing that, but that's also one of the
Miley
things.
Cyrus, huh?
Montana. So I got one, and I was like, oh shit, they don't know this. This is bad. But also leaving my position at the cult was, you know, I'm 32. I'm just I'm getting quite long in the tooth frontline work in terms of what these young people need. So also doing critical self-reflection for understanding what that is. And now Ariel's in there, and she's fucking kicking ass, and I love it.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's like kind of that stepping back as well. Like,
Yeah.
so I've been moving away from the direct presentation work. I still step up, especially knowing, kind of depending on the school community, like do a lot of work in Metro Vancouver where the population is a lot of young Asian kids, and so especially the tropes around Asian communities being very conservative, and I'm like, let me tell you about the gay emperors of China. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, Wikipedia that. And so it's like, yeah, it's that. And one last thing around diversity, and I think we often think of it mostly around gender and sexuality and race a lot of times, and we talked about ability as well. And so one thing where I failed was actually in the filmmaking program last year. We had a young person who required ASL interpretation, and I was like, great, cool. And I was like, well, how are we gonna pay for this? And now I'm like, every time I do a grant application, that's just built in. I just automatically put in this amount of money for ASL interpretation, regardless if I have a youth wanting to use it or not, because I had to scramble to find the money. Yeah. I was like, this person's gonna take part in this program somehow. And I managed to find some like random funders who gave me like a couple grand here or there, but like it cost a lot more work, and I was like, it was just my failing of not being prepared. Because again, it's like, I think that those young folks don't ever expect to, you know, be able to take part in those programs. And so it's like, this is gonna change.
Yeah, and then also like I had to learn there are different types of ASL,
Yeah.
there are different types of teachers. There are so many parts of that sector where I was like, I'm deeply ignorant about this, and I need to find or consult or get an expert in the field to do this work or to help teach me, because if I'm gonna be in charge of a program, you have to do your due diligence.
Yeah.
Another thing I'll throw out here is a little wormhole. Is recently I've been talking to some institutions, and they're talking about the fact that diversity is no longer the way we should be approaching it from a methodological or paradigm, is that it's inclusive practice. Because diversity is a continuance of othering, and what we need to be doing, which is a broader term, is saying we need to be an inclusive organization. Our approaches need to be inclusive, and that word is I think moving in the vernacular of youth engagement, that it's beyond diversity, because diversity still in a weird way gives power to certain people, but inclusive practice goes beyond that, and it includes privilege. Like, so when you think of you know, I guess you could categorize that as diversity, but I'm not sold either way yet, but I have a sneaking suspicion that the sector's gonna go with inclusive.
And that's where like language changes and evolves. I mean, a lot of the meetings.
Only I can say Indian.
Yeah, yeah. When it's like one of those things where like you go into a classroom and we talk about here the 7 different ways you can describe non-binary folks, right? And roughly same meanings, but generational changes. And I can use the word queer, but our elders hate that word because that was a weapon.
Right.
And I use it because it's empowering.
Yeah.
And and so yeah.
Nice. Lots to keep learning.
A whole language learning.
Yeah.
And we've been trying at the Alliance to do ASL at most of our workshops, but it is expensive. So what we do now is when people register, it's one of the questions we ask on the registration form, do you require ASL interpretation? So that we then hire them when we know that we're going to have deaf people coming, because they're so excluded.
And that was like for me also, because it was like it's being queer and also needing ASL interpretation. That's again, as you were saying, there's different types of ASL, because the signs for certain terms in our community are going to be only exclusive to folks in our community. And so we worked with a young person, like, who are the people you normally work with? We'll hire them. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it was a
practitioner, I failed you in this moment. And I'm gonna acknowledge the extra work you had to do in teaching me. So compensating for that teaching, that teachable moment where you're acknowledging that the person who was always othered actually gave you something in that moment, helped you with your job, and to admit that we failed them in that moment, which is totally fine, but to not have to do it time and time again, I think there's just a lack of accountability sometimes with the way we engage young people. I think too, this just got me thinking, if I was on a jury and I read this, that you had a contingency line item on your budget because you explained in a paragraph the ASL thing, I'd give you that money instantly. To say, I know because of my own ignorance, I'm gonna fail in one part of this planning, so I need an extra X dollars because I wanna make sure that I don't exclude anyone. I'd be like, I would see that's a smart organization. They already acknowledged that they're probably not gonna get it right. Because I don't think I've ever gotten a whole program right.
It's a really important thing. I mean, when we did a workshop with Landon Krantz, who actually is now setting up a business for interpretation, to offer interpretation with a little company. But we got contacted by Vancouver Community College because they had a deaf student. And when she saw that we were actually offering ASL interpretation and ASL course, she wanted to come and do her internship with us. And so we did it, and it was fantastic. The staff got to learn the language, the alphabet. We got to learn some expressions. She taught us. It was really great. So it just, you never know what great things are going to come out of just being, more sensitive and inclusive towards all people. It was great.
And don't be afraid to actually engage in the experts, because I think that when we as an organization first really started to tackle it, I think a lot of the staff were feeling uncomfortable or anxious about not being equipped, and you brought up professional development and acquiring the knowledge that, to allow yourself to feel confident to deliver. But Indigenous perspectives was something that we as an organization really, felt really important to have transpire across our programs. And so past year we engaged an Indigenous organization called Indigenize, and we collaborated with them to be able to deliver a full week of learning labs for artists. And at first we felt pressure to have to deliver it ourselves, and acquire all of this knowledge, but then also realizing, no, we shouldn't be, because we're not the ones from the culture and the background, and we don't necessarily have the knowledge, but we can collaborate with an organization and experts that are able to bring that forward. And in fact, this Learning Lab segment, which was specifically geared towards building creative capacity for artists that are working in classrooms in BC, and they were specifically geared towards Indigenous artists. And so to have an Indigenous organization deliver the content was amazing. And we received so much positive feedback from the artists saying, thank you so much for making space for this, for bringing this into our sphere. And it was so great for us to be able to support and organize it, but not necessarily be in the position to deliver that type of content. So my point is to actually engage in the experts and know that you don't necessarily, when diversity comes up as a theme, like or inclusion, you don't necessarily have to take ownership to right away, and you can engage in the experts that are available to actually support that.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that question about diversity, Samantha?
No, I think that's really good things, obviously. But I think what Rika was saying and what Kim was saying, it's how you keep you safe, and it's how you are responsible and accountable. So when you reach out to the community members that already know what you're doing, or already know what, you know what I mean, that already know this stuff, that already have that knowledge, instead of you trying to present something yourself, half-assing it, potentially causing harm, you can reach out to a community member, an expert to do it, support them, pay them, always pay them, and build that capacity and make sure that you're doing your absolute best to make a safer space.
So the last question before we open it up is about the barriers. We know that there are specific barriers, and it would be interesting to hear you name what the barriers are in trying to get people engaged in you know, what we're doing
Mhm.
in our sector, in the culture and arts and creativity. What are the barriers and how do we reduce those barriers? I would love to hear if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. So I think a huge one is cost, money, yeah.
Mhm.
Making sure everything is accessible financially for youth organizations, as you can. And that's hard, it's really hard. We're a nonprofit gallery, so we have no money. And so we have no money to, you know, ensure that we can lower our costs for programming. But my kind of philosophy is I don't care where I'm getting that money from, I'll find it, I'll make sure these kids aren't gonna pay. Or like, for my school programming, I try and keep the cost as low as I can, and if a school that isn't well funded, so an inner city school, comes in to the gallery and they're like, we can't pay $750 a student, I'm like, don't worry about it. I got it. I don't know how I got it. I'll figure that out later, I'll talk to the board, don't worry. Come on in.
Yeah.
And I think another huge barrier is, and I find for Indigenous youth, is if they don't know the space. And I think this goes for a lot of marginalized youth. If they don't know the space. So the Billericay Gallery, we just started our education programs when I was hired in 2015. Previous to that, we didn't have any youth programming. And the clientele, is that the proper appropriate word? The patrons that came to the gallery were really rich old white people. And so if you want to scare away brown youth, fill your gallery with rich old white people. And so
I get scared. I still get scared.
yeah. You know, the first year stuff. But actively working to change what your gallery actually looks like. Working to make sure that the youth can see themselves there. Working to make sure that you're really involved in the communities that you want to come to your place. So that you're not just some weird person that people bring their kids to every now and then. You're an actual community member. People recognize your face. They know who you are. You're out there. You're also doing work in the community as well that's outside of your job.
Yes.
And it sounds like such a big thing because we're already so tired and so overworked, but it's not just a responsibility for our job to work in our communities, it's just our responsibility as community members. So it's a lot of work, but that work is really important, especially I think for non-Indigenous folks or for white folks who want to be inclusive and include marginalized populations, etc., to actually do a lot of work to make sure that they're not a part of the community, but in that community and know what's happening, and working on yourself as a person too, because these things aren't just your job, they're literally your life responsibility.
Thank you.
A bunch of things. I mean, yeah, financial are big things. Youth engagement is not cheap. If you can't afford it, don't do it.
It's an important message. Say it again.
It's one of the, well, I mean, I've learned, and we'll talk about possibly successes and failures, but I mean, when I started out with other schools, like we had a Rise Against Homophobia youth short video contest, which had previously been funded by Heritage Canada, and then we lost that grant, and we kept trying to pretend that we could do it. And it was such a half-assed thing that I just felt bad the entire time I was doing it, but it was kind of expected of us to keep doing it, because it was like this thing that's been going for a few years, and it was just like me in the office, this like program coordinator with no other staff, running a film contest, not providing any support to young people, no financial whatever, no direction, and like we just kept trying to do it, and it failed miserably because it wasn't really engagement. What was I gonna say? For the film festival, a couple things that we noticed. So film festivals typically young people can't come to because the films aren't rated. So we actually go through the process of rating most of our films, which is a very expensive, long process with the BC Classification Office or whatever. We can't get them all rated, but we get most of them rated. So that allows young people to actually come to the film festival. And we have a youth membership, which is cheaper than the adult membership. And then we also have youth pricing or access pricing. So it's access pricing, so anyone can actually access that pricing. And to be honest, like tickets aren't our jam either. Like if you need a ticket to a film, we'll give you a ticket to a film. It's just, that's our service as a student member. What else? I will say that like as a film festival that happens in the summer, we do struggle getting young people into the theaters. like other film festivals that happened, they typically happen during the school year, and so you have kind of captive audiences to bring those young people into your theaters and do a thing. Whereas kind of Out in Schools goes into schools, does the work in schools, and hopes that they feel a connection enough to come to the film festival later. So we provide that kind of like entry point, bringing schools into, our films into schools, and then hopefully they kind of find community at our events and our programming. So we kind of look at it systemically in all the things we do. It's also important, like when you go through strategic planning as a nonprofit, like is it a priority for you? You can write a grant to do a project, but is it actually a priority for your organization? And so we actually make it a strategic priority. So every time we do something, we're like, we look at our priorities, like which one's missing, which we need to come back to. It's the same thing with your values, right? If something doesn't align with your values, why are you doing it? Yeah. Those are things right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'll just jump in. For me, it's still, I'm like, so for example, I've had 4 emails in the past 2 days asking me detailed questions around how can I do this, what's appropriate practice, how did you do it, can we meet for coffee? And now I have basically a stock email that I go into my drafts, and I copy and paste, and I have to explain why uncompensated time is just not, it's something I can't do anymore. Like I have to focus on, I'm an artist. I'm a starving artist. So it's a really conflicted thing for me because as an Indigenous community member, it's a part of who I am to give back, but I also want to recognize that, and to me the biggest barrier is still ignorance. It's still a lack of education for the adults, not even for the young people. I'm not putting that responsibility on them. If we're the adult allies and we're the practitioners, then we need to be the experts in the field. And I'm finding that we are struggling with that, or we're taking on programs that we don't have the capacity or resources to actually execute in a meaningful and ethical way. And so for me, like I'm having to really, I feel like educate the community around, hire a cultural consultant, hire a program advisor, hire an expert in the field, hire art starts to come and talk to you about what it actually means. They do an excellent PD, and just incredible resource. But I think too, it's that I think specifically with the Indigenous community, I'm finding a lot is that because there's not a lot of Indigenous theater people, or people who have training beyond their own artistic practice, but sometimes we're really leaning hard on these people. And I remember sitting on a panel with Carmen Aguirre at one time, who's an incredible Indigenous playwright and artist, and I got really frustrated because people were asking her elementary questions. I had to say, this is Carmen Aguirre. She's like an excellent person globally. You would never go to a PhD person and ask them, what does it mean to add 1 + 1? And I feel like, and I kind of say this, like I have a PhD, I jokingly say, in whiteness. My whole life. Canadian theater, whiteness. I know exactly what y'all do. I'm an expert. And I've had to learn myself. I've had to teach myself. And this ignorance and lack of education and the lack of rigor, I feel sometimes, is that we're putting the pressure on our Indigenous community members who are working very hard to then also educate the non-Indigenous community members. It's the plight of the oppressed. Not only do they face their oppression, not only do they endure it, but then have to explain it to their oppressors. Come on.
Yeah.
And that's it's something that happens a lot, and I'm really I think a lot of us are just, I'm a bit shocked. I was like, why would you ask Carmen that? Why would you do that? Like, it's really strange to me when I see very intelligent people doing things that I just wouldn't, if it was the reverse, it just wouldn't fly. It just wouldn't fly. You wouldn't ask Peter Hinton or Gillian Kiley at the NAC, who's Shakespeare? Don't ask Kevin Loring, the artistic director of the National Arts Center, about, do you know any Indigenous playwrights? Be appropriate with the people that you have in your space, and there's a respect thing and a humility thing, but for me I think the biggest barrier still is that us as practitioners, as the adult allies, are not rigorous enough. Like I do this every day, compulsively educate myself, and I still feel like I know nothing. To educate ourselves, to then be the experts, to be excellent, to be appropriate when we get in front of our young people. That we've really built our capacities to be able to safely engage with our young people. And I think think that's still the biggest barrier. We're the decision makers, we're the taxpayers, we're the ones who sit on these committees. It cannot be our young people. The biggest barrier for young people participating in the arts is still us.
I think Kim's absolutely right. We have to educate ourselves, particularly around Indigenous culture. You know, we can't expect people like Kim or Margot Kane or Kevin Waring or Marie Clements and all of those people to take the time out of their own practice to educate us about their culture. We need to learn about it ourselves, so that's really important.
And Harlan Pruden at the latest Talking Stick Festival said it in a way that he's an LGBTQ
Yep.
advocate, and he's worked with Hillary Clinton. He's incredible. And
His
he just,
resume is like this
it's
long.
so long, and he's so humble. He's so humble, and he's so rigorous about his own practice and expertise. And he said, I think what our allies need to consider is that every time that I have to write an email or go for coffee or take a meeting, even just to say no, is time taken away from our spiritual practice. It's time away that I didn't get to smudge, that I didn't get to call my mom, that I didn't get to go into deep thinking for my work. It's time spent away from our work. When usually 9 times out of 10, like, I feel like there's a lot of resources out there. I believe that there are a lot of resources out there right now to at least get you to a place where you can hire an expert in the field or know more, because I've had to do it.
Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think, based on what you, I'm gonna piggyback on a little bit of what you said about, us as, the adults or the administrators or the educators being the barrier. And, so the example that I will share, because Brenda had asked for us to share an example in which we've engaged the young people successfully. And it kind of came a couple of years ago. In my previous role, I was responsible for the booking and touring program. So we manage a roster of 100 performing artists. And these are the artists that are going into schools all across the province. And there's about 600,000 arts experiences that happen over the course of a year. However, when you ask who's responsible for selecting and putting these performances in front of these kids, at no point did the process actually involve a young person. And so that was something that when I was in the role, I was able to sort of really examine. And there's 2 steps, 2 filters. So there's the actual jury process where the selection's made, and then there's the actual showcase, which is an annual conference where, you know, up to 40 artists present over the 2 days, and from that, almost 2,000 performances happen. 3 years ago, I was able to bring an actual young person onto the jury, and it came from a previous year where we were in a scenario of 3 educators and 3 artists, and one of the individuals, when going through applications, came across hip-hop content and rap. And their perspective was that this wasn't an art form. And they were projecting sort of their own personal tastes and biases. And I remember witnessing a conversation between another artist, and they had a great learning experience, but that was a flag saying, oh my God, these individuals, these adults are in this room making the decision of what young people are going to experience. Yeah. No, that's not going to happen again. And so from that instance, we've brought on young people to sit on our jury, to score, to be paid, and to share their voice. And most often they are so diligent, so prepared, and so smart in what they have to offer and what they share. And the young person that was on our jury last year was part of a youth group that is represented on our roster, but it was just an example of how young people need to be included in the voice, because we often have such a top-down approach where we are trying to program and bring change for young people, but we're not really asking, consulting, or involving them in a meaningful way. And sort of our next action is to also ensure that the selection, the overall final selections that happen, they're also a part of it, and to shift from them being the passive audience that's present to an actual engaged delegate that's present at the conference. So those are some of the ways in which we're really trying to tackle that, and also realize that we have gaps. Like we're taking slow and steady steps towards bridging those gaps, but yeah, it's so important to realize that people have so much potential, and that we underestimate, and we're the ones that are standing in the way of allowing them to actually prosper. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I used to work at the Vancouver Foundation, so I was on the opposite side of asking for money. And used to work in the Children, Youth and Families granting, and we had at the time a thing called the Youth Philanthropy Council. So the foundation, which no longer does it, also one of the reasons why I left, was that they gave them like $100 grand a year. Young people from across the Lower Mainland, from all different backgrounds, were able to kind of decide where this money goes, and they took it so seriously that we kind of had to like chill. Like they would be in interviews with other young people, like, why do you need T-shirts? Why do you need this?
Their budgets?
Yeah, they were like, they took it so seriously, and so they were so rigorous that it was like so great to see. But also like as the adults in the room, like it's not my job to tell them what they can and can't do. I just offer them advice. Just being like, adult applications don't get this much rigor, like in the sense of like what we choose, what people can spend their money on. It's just like in being able to mentor that without making decisions for them was really cool, and I think that comes to apply to a lot of the work we do now, right?
Okay, thank you, Brandon. I'm just going to ask Samantha if she has anything to add to this about barriers, or if you think we can open it, or if we should open it up, or what would you? Have you got something you want to say?
No.
Okay, so this is fantastic. Lots of great information. I want to point out a couple of things that I've come across. They were both great. One of them is a study that was done called Strengthening Youth and Communities Through Art, which was done by the City of Surrey by Ed Westerhuis, who's here, Edward, Westerhuis, and it's really interesting and worth looking at. If you want it, let me know. The other one is a very interesting article from out of the States by the Wallace Foundation called Building Millennial Audiences. It's also very interesting in terms of what you can learn about that particular group of young people. Okay, so I'm sure you all have questions. Who would like to go first? Yes.
This dovetails onto talking about barriers, but I'm just curious to hear any of your thoughts on or experiences with dealing with adult fear, because I know I work at Green Thumb Theatre, and all our work is social issue based, and so we're typically selling to educators who then bring the work into schools, and so often we get the comment of like, a play about anxiety and depression, that's great, oh, it's so needed, I don't know how to talk about it though, so we can't do it. And that sort of fear of opening a can of worms, and I'm just interested in your guys' experience of that, or how you navigated it. And
It dialogue, and what really helps is when the artist has support. So there's actually somebody, and this has happened in Indigenous content, where there's somebody on the touring process that is there available for support for questions, because that gives them ease of mind. And I think that's something we encounter all the time.
Yeah.
We see phenomenal performances that are presented, and because it's the individual making that decision, often it's one person.
Yeah.
It's one person. And if they have their own personal biases or barriers or concerns, like you said, fears, it really impacts what's possible to be experienced by the young people. And so I have encountered that, and I've had several conversations with educators. I'm just trying to give them enough assurance, and ultimately it's their decision. We can provide as much support and conversation, but it is ultimately their decision, and it's so different based on the region too.
Right.
Sometimes what works really well in the Lower Mainland would not fly in Fort St. John, or Yeah, and so that's something that artists have to navigate constantly, and it impacts the amount of work that they get and their exposure, because your goal as an artist is also to be able to go into these schools and have these experiences with young people. So yeah, it's really tough, and I've seen artists combat it by making sure that there's either adequate, more than adequate support in terms of materials that they provide prior to entering a performance or into a school, but also to have actually a person that's available to be able to offer that guidance. Because those instances where that's available, then I'm able to share that with the educator and give them peace of mind and convince them that this is a good option. Yeah, it's so hard because it varies based on region and person.
I'll
Which
also
is why a young person,
Sorry.
no, but I'm just gonna add that this is why a young person being present alongside that educator at that decision-making process is really important, because then at least they can add their voice and opinion, and it's not just like completely on the shoulders of one person.
Be like, could you ask the student council president or
Absolutely.
advisor to also be there or fold them into the conversation?
Yeah.
I mean, I also say as a program that brings LGBTQ content into classrooms and to schools, like we get the same worry. It's in the last couple of years we've had to worry about it less because even the last BC Liberal government was much more progressive in the last couple months of its tenure than it's been a long time. So when you have and you know, and we do get teachers who are like, we need this, but is there a way I can see it beforehand or whatever? And so to have, you know, validators obviously, so like folks like BCTF and folks, basically people who can vouch for you that your program is appropriate and necessary. So yeah, BCTF, Ministry of Education, any kind of those big validators for the adult, because adults love validation. They're like, if something goes wrong, I can blame someone else.
Government likes numbers.
Yeah, and yeah, they do. And when it comes to those conversations afterwards, like I start this conversation, how do I deal with it? It's also like knowing where your programming intersects with the curriculum, right? Especially in schools. And so like I do that. I use the curriculum and I use policy. Like each school district has different policies on all the things. So you have to kind of look at district by district, unfortunately. It's not a provincial-wide thing. And, you know, when I have a school in Surrey who's like, the teacher wants us in, but the administrator's like, well, it's not really in the curriculum. And I'm like, here are the places it's in the curriculum. Here is the school board policy. Here is the Ministry of Education talking about it. And like the excuses become less and less, or like they run out of excuses for good programming. I don't know if that necessarily helps you, but.
No, it all sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But there's no secret key. So
It's
the
about
district
building
by district thing.
relationships.
It is the relationships, and
Yeah.
like, you know, you do a good job at one school, and then that teacher like, oh, I saw Green Thumb do this, and that's kind of how you.
Wow, because Green Thumb does incredible work and are like
I know when you're like
national
they like
leaders.
numbers, you're like, you'd think they would.
Yeah.
So and then I'm like, who are these people? Like, where's the rigor in that person
Yeah.
actually understanding the institutional excellence that Green Thumb does?
Yeah.
But it's good. That's a good point about district by district because it can fluctuate so much, and yeah, we do that curriculum connections as well. But it's a good point
Yeah.
to.
And the
You can
idea
zone in further.
of getting a youth advisor on board, I mean, I think that is a great idea, you know, in those schools. To suggest that they start that practice would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
And you can make, like, I've made those demands in, like, meeting with boards and committees, being like, where's your youth representation? And the other practice I'll do if there's no young people in the room, I'll put, like, whatever's in my pocket, be like, this is just for all of us to remember that these are all the young people who are not at the table right now.
Right.
This is their seat. This is their voices not being here.
And that makes me realize we haven't even acknowledged all the folks who are watching
Yeah.
this in the
Robot
live stream. Are there any questions that have come forward? Because we encourage you if you have a question.
There's just one question, more of a comment really, submitted by the Cowichan Performing Arts Center, wanting to know if any of you are familiar with the I Go to the Arts program. That's spelled I as in the eyeball, B-Y-E. Yes, if any of you want to talk about what it is.
I'm not familiar with the program.
Okay, it is, they mentioned that it's a program that allows students in grades 8 to 12 to attend specific I Go performances at various theaters across Canada and the US for $5 a ticket. So, a good thing for everyone to know.
Yeah, Elaine.
Maybe I should tell you who I am, because I don't think you know who I am. I'm the artistic director of Miscellaneous Productions. We have now 18 years of direct community engagement with primarily at-risk and experiential youth from huge, diverse backgrounds. And we're currently on tour. I'm back in town for a few days and then we leave again, crack it on Wednesday. We do large-scale hip-hop music theater with at-risk and experiential youth. We're in residence at the Dance Center and have been now for a few years and really couldn't do it without them. We've worked in a variety of horrible spaces around Vancouver, and now being at the Dance Center has been a dream. We have an office there for our interns. Our interns were youth in our company and grew up in our company, got scholarships. They come from very, very low-income backgrounds. They got scholarships to university. One of the interns is still in university, and they're working for us part-time. We've encountered so many issues over the years to deal with this topic. And I'm just gonna confess, I feel a little bit uncomfortable when I hear the whole idea of developing audiences, developing youth audiences, pushed into the same category as creation process with youth. To me, that's a completely different thing, because developing audiences is about capital and capitalism, and developing youth to do creation process is, you know, you're not gonna make money off that, you're not gonna build audiences, you're gonna build them. You're gonna build the youth in the program, and hopefully, again, we have a lot of young artists that have come out of our program who are now back working with us, so hopefully we'll develop them. Our experience has been that over these 18 years, we are severely underfunded. We are not institutionalized. We're a community-based group that was founded in East Vancouver on a basement floor with a group of trans, lesbian, and feminist women of color. And we've taken the program all over Canada, the United States, and we were recently in Europe. We seem to have more support in Europe than we do here, and that was the internet. Rome and Barcelona found us, and we've been privileged enough to go over and work with youth communities over there.
I'm just gonna ask you, do you have a question, Elaine?
No, I don't. I just have a few things to say.
Oh, okay.
Because I have been doing this work for a really long time, and we're currently on tour, and we don't feel like we have a voice on these institutionalized panels, and we just want to get our message out there. Right now, when we're in the community, we're hearing that artists are coming into communities, but they're limiting youth who don't speak English to their programs. And that's a real barrier for young people, that artists are actually putting out, oh, we're gonna do this community engaged program, or we're gonna do this audience development program, but must speak English, or must have basic English. That's a barrier for youth. If you wanna work with culturally diverse youth, if you wanna work with kids who are immigrants and refugees, either you have those languages, or you go to a place like Mosaic and you get translation. In terms of the whole idea of safety, and Judith's heard me say this a million times, I don't believe you can really create a safe space. You can try to create a safe space, but yesterday we were, I won't say where, but we were deep in the valley in an alternative school, and in the middle of a hip-hop dance workshop, 3 big guys came in and disrupted and started making fun of the kids who were dancing, and the safe space that we had created was instantly destroyed.
But you did create one, it was just destroyed.
How can you create a safe space if three bullies can come in and disrupt everything, and then all the teachers from the alternative school immediately rush to deal with them, and then the kids who were actually brave enough to get up and dance were, you know, they sat down. They shut down for the rest of the workshop because these 3 bullies run the school. They really do. So we go into a lot of those situations, but yesterday was the most extreme we'd ever seen. You know, educators are at a loss. It's up to us to help them out, for sure. And I don't know what the answer is. Aftercare, you talked about aftercare, that's a big one with us. There's no money from funders for us for aftercare, and we do aftercare for 10 years sometimes with some of our more at-risk There's some of our more at-risk youth right now who have been on and off the streets for so many years, and they're trying to get their lives together, and we're the only constant in their life. And there's no funding for that. We're doing that really as a volunteer organization. So when people sit on arts juries, I think they need to understand how important that aftercare is. And I don't think that funders or people who are sitting on the juries, because what we're finding with a lot of these juries is it certainly isn't my peers sitting on these juries. It certainly isn't people who have been devoted their practice to working with marginalized communities and at-risk youth. It's different from working in an institution and creating youth. It's a different thing.
Okay, Maine.
Okay.
I think, you know, at the reception afterwards, if people are interested, they can come up and get more information about the work that you're doing. But I'd like you to wrap it up in about a minute, so because
Go ahead.
the time is going, and I'm sure there may be other questions. So if you don't mind, yes, Judith.
Hi, everybody. I want to address the question of capacity building for people who are doing this work, the adults. I think we're facing a kind of crisis right now in the country. I've been involved in the field for 30 years, and I'm currently working on advocacy and policy work at federal level. Despite the fact that, I'm sorry, this is a statement, I'll make it brief, but despite the fact that the Canada Council has recently eliminated community engaged art as its own distinct field of practice, and there's a lot of opposition building to that policy and others that have recently been instituted. We're just finishing a 6-year research project on art for social change, community engaged art for social change in Canada, first study in the country. And what we're finding is that the field is growing exponentially. It's becoming trendoidal. That's very dangerous because, as you were saying, Kim, there are a lot of people entering the field who don't have the capacity to do it safely, ethically, and as richly as this work enables people who have really good training. And there are very few places in the country to be mentored or to be trained. We have a 2-year graduate program, in first one in the country at SFU called Community Engaged Art for Social Change with graduate support in the summer. That's not in the pad. But we know that the community of practice really needs to develop capacity to do this work well. And so I'm looking for suggestions. We have lots of ideas that come out of all the work we've been doing, but I would love to hear from people about their ideas about how best to build capacity for doing this work in the best way possible, especially at a time when there's no money for it and a lot of people are getting on the bandwagon.
Can I just add that too in terms of advocacy for ourselves? Our advocates can't be our advocates if we don't actually put in the budget items to say, because you didn't give me this money, I can't do PD for my staff and this suffers.
Yeah.
I feel like the arts organization and the community too long suffers from the trope that we're poor, we have no money, and there's nothing we can do. You can do something, you all write budgets. Right, I need $10,000 for professional development. When you don't get it, write your advocate and say, I didn't get this and I couldn't do it. Because if everyone started doing it, it gives Brenda and other institutions the actual numbers and ability to then go to the table and advocate for us. I think it does us a disservice to say, I didn't have the money, I don't know how to get the money. You can make the ask, and if we all start making the ask together and say, because we didn't get this funding, this is, Brenda, what we've lost, then they as an institution can advocate for us. But make the big asks, put them on the budgets, and say, the first thing that had to go was this, and this is what I lost. Arts institutions, advocacy, advocates can't work for us if we're not making the ask, because the MPs, MLAs go, well, you didn't ask us for money. The Arts Council goes, I didn't know you needed that money. Then all of a sudden the juries are sitting in the room, sitting on our hands saying, nobody asked for more.
I got asked by the policy chief of staff for the minister 3 weeks ago in Ottawa, what do you need?
That's what they want to know.
There is an openness, the door is open for the first time I have ever seen at federal level. Of course, we know municipally and provincially things are really expanding. We've got new money in BC, which is great. But at the federal level, what I'm seeing is I've had 37 meetings over the last year is an openness to the idea that these forms of art practice, which are relational and which are designed to create social change and empowerment for various communities, with various communities, is something of interest to immigration, refugees, and settlement, to Health Canada, to status of women, to mining, to, you know. So what I think we need to do as a community is figure out, what do we need? You know, how do we describe what it is that we do? There's a large communication piece that has to happen now, and we're ready to do it. And so I just suggest that we all give a little bit of thought to those processes. Thanks. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
Yeah. Let's have you, and then we'll have you.
It's just a kind of an addendum to what both of you were saying. It's great that the federal government is asking us what do we need, but with the latest Canada Council grant, they told us to be aspirational, and my institution got the exact same thing we have for the last 10 years. And I know that we weren't alone.
Yeah.
We
So
were
all-
aspirational, we asked for all kinds
So
of
what do
things,
we do
but
after when we get the deny? What's the follow-up?
my executive director's been following up with the
Right?
Canada
And
Council.
so if we all
Yeah.
start doing that, that's the good work that continues.
Sure.
It's the beyond the proscenium.
Yeah.
It's that I view companies that don't even make the ask.
Yeah.
Well, we have to start.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on around that. You know,
Mhm.
there's criticism about the way it's been operating, and, you know, it's unfolding.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'm trying to collect information from other provinces and, you know, find out if there's a national voice, which I think there is.
Right.
So it just takes time to build that. I know Judith's been working really hard on that too.
Mhm.
I don't know if this will help anyone, but I mean, we are an educational program. We get no money from the Ministry of Education, even though we've been around for almost 15 years. Majority of our funding comes from individual giving, just people who donate $5, $10 per year, whatever. I mean, that comes from our, you know, the queer trans community that like who went through school and never got a program like this, and so they support it. The rest of it kind of comes from corporate and a small bit of, you know, lottery money. And we also have been told, like, be bigger, like, come to us with ask. And it's actually like, if you have the ability, it's not everyone's ability, and to do a lot of government relations work, and like, you have to kind of like get in behind the scenes to like the people who know people. But also we're trying different avenues. We kind of just came, even under the new NDP government, we were basically at the point of like, we thought, you know, we'd have a better relationship with you, but we're actually not getting anywhere further than we did with the last government. And so we're like, what about the Ministry of Health or health regions? Because our work, even though it's arts-based, had all the outcomes, all the impacts that we measure are actually all health-based. And so how do we create relationships with those types of funders when it comes to mental health, when it comes to physical health, right? Like our LGBTQ programming, we talk about, you know, suicide, substance use, all those things are health related. And so how do we actually tie in unconventional funders in a sense? Because like we never really approached the Ministry of Health before. And now we're trying to develop that relationship. And they're like, well, why don't you actually set up as a consultancy for us? And then we'll hire you to come into the region to do these workshops and we'll do the evaluation. I'm like, great, maybe we'll get stable funding that way. You know, it's like, and so we're looking at those avenues of like, when we think about outcomes with young people, especially if they're health-based, there's possibly health money out there as well. Sometimes when we travel into rural communities, we are a sliding scale organization. So if a school can't afford us, I just say whatever, I'll do it anyways. And when we travel, like it's expensive. Like as we know, traveling across our country or even just in the province is expensive. And so we ask the schools to help with the funding, but we don't expect them to. And sometimes they'll have like, oh, I got $5,000 from my local foundation for mental health. And well, that's what we're going to use to bring you. Great. And it's not like we're stretching the truth or anything. We're actually doing that work. But they never really thought about it in an arts-based way before. So that's some tips and tricks from us.
The other small strategy coming from working for MCFD and the Representative for Children and Youth is your politician, your MLA, your deputy minister, your associate deputy minister, you don't want any of them. You want the next person. Because they're all feeding each other. To me, the best politicking I've ever seen is they've gone and they've found the manager, they found the decision maker, and they found the person that's not too busy politicking, but actually doing the work. And I've found from the inside out, it's the third or fourth person down on whatever their ministry org chart is. That person is usually a mom, that's usually a working soccer mom. Take her out for coffee.
Yeah.
She's the one who's going to be the mover and shaker because she's got the ear of the three above.
guerrilla bureaucrats, I
Yeah.
call them.
And you have to know too that the ministries are all very separate. You know, they don't, they work
Left
very,
hand is not talking with
they
the
work
right
very
hand.
independently.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to keep that in mind. Yes, you have a question.
Yeah, I work at the Master Theatre out of New West. We're doing a huge overhaul of our programming.
such exciting work.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is the barrier of excellence. We find that especially when we're looking at funding, there's this assumption that quote unquote good arts programming is tied to something that can be measured with the Eurocentric model of artistic excellence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we get past that? How do we, I'd love to know what you have done to work around that when you come across that barrier.
Create your own metric system.
Yeah.
Like, on all honesty, how do you measure art? They're gonna use the one that they've been given as a jury to use theirs and just say that's a Eurocentric model that doesn't relate to how we work. These are the metrics of excellence that we use. You can please use the jurist, use the sheet of paper in terms of how you can reshift the paradigm.
Yeah.
That's what I've done.
Yeah, that's right. So you actually wrote something for the jurors
Yeah,
in
like,
your grant?
yeah, so I kind of would give a summarizing thing, or whatever, or just say, as an Indigenous person, when I'm an Indigenous grant, I'll share with the jury members, these are the metrics of excellence that I'll be using, and it's yours, like family-centric, community-centric, cultural, ceremonial, and protocol-based, but also that, even the acknowledgement that when you're giving the metrics, but just provide your own. Yeah. Good idea.
Just quickly, I think that's such an interesting idea, and I'm wondering your thoughts on how limiting it is to operate outside the bounds of the question being asked as we move more and more to online fillable forms and character counts, and like there's no room. So I
It's
how do you
usually
do that?
1,000 character, and got anything else? That, and right, on that one, use that box.
That's great.
Or when you do a real short one and be like, and this is where I'm gonna do my metrics one. Like I've had to
Yeah,
manipulate being an Indigenous person on a very Eurocentric form.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Game it. Game.
Oh yeah. I just want to know everyone else is
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah,
if there's
so
any-
write that down.
That's okay.
Don't quote me, oh, it's online.
Get him set.
Any more questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
The consultation process with kids, how does that work? How do you approach a kid and say, hey, can I ask you about the grant we're applying for?
I don't look at so much as consultation, it's relationship building. And it's not just one-time relationship building, it's long-lasting reciprocal relationships. And so the gallery right now is going through a process where we've had some failed youth programs. Because I tried to run before I could walk. But right now, I'm doing a project where I'm meeting with different youth, or with different organizations, community leaders, community members, literally anyone who will talk to me. I'm like, I will pay you, let's talk. And so just like building those relationships, becoming someone that people recognize, going to events, like going to like the Friendship Center events, going so people know who you are, so you're not just like some strange adult that's like, hi, can we talk? Like, you know, just like going and becoming a community member and really fostering relationships in a really, what's the word I'm looking for? In a way that's not calculated, in like a really genuine, authentic, thank you. Where is it? Really authentic, genuine way. Like, you need to want to do this, and if you are doing it just to do it, people can tell, and you can tell, for sure.
Yeah, you can tell.
They will not do the time of day.
It's like bad acting, you know when it's bad. We all know it's bad.
Powerful. Yeah, it's also, yeah, I think when it comes to things like the youth council that I used to help with, it's acknowledging that you can't just throw a young person on a board of adults and expect them to be comfortable there. Some young people are. They're natural, like, they just fit in those situations. They're kind of
I'll
waxing
take
on
a
the-
seat at the table.
Yeah, like, and great, there's your seat. And then some people need a little extra help, and so we're not all youth workers. We're not all. So again, find that expertise. It's your audiences are going to be different. Your young people are going to be different. So for me, it's like there's a handful of LGBTQ drop-in programs for young people, and so I can create relationships with those programs, and then you kind of develop a relationship with your young people, and you have to kind of you build their trust, and it's a long process, but you're not just some rando who doesn't have any connection to their
out of the van.
Yeah, it's like, I had people, like, I literally had an email yesterday from someone in Calgary being like, I'm starting an after-school program for LGBT youth, and I'm like, what are your tips? I'm like, oh.
Here's my invoice.
And it is specifically around, it was a gay older man, and it's difficult for those situations, because like in the past, like gay men couldn't be out in schools because there's a whole connection to pedophilia, and so that still exists today, especially around trans individuals, and so like helping them navigate that as well, like what they want to do good work, but you really shouldn't be doing this on your own. And like we're undergoing a process around, we have 2 policies. Policies are important because that's how you become accountable, around adults who work with youth, and we also have one about youth accessibility at events. And so those 2 policies are guiding, we're currently revising them to update them, because it's like, you know, like one says like can't be smoking or drugs or whatever, and now we have to add marijuana to that because that's now a legal substance, and like all those things have to be living documents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always find too the most success I've had with youth programs is when I've had a youth board or a youth group or youth people who I consistently am investing in, but all great, go to these centers that already have the safe space, trusting relationships, go to their events, put your body in their space, and then to share your programming and see who latches on. But to me, the most success I've had and the culture as a youth program manager, where it's like an 18 or 19-year-old program, they have every Monday night, there's youth panel, there's a program, and it's basically like the youth board. And consistently having that living in the organization, just find that your programming is like, I can just go to my youth board and they'll create the next project. So that to me is the ultimate. I found over 12 years of doing youth work to getting a youth consistent group and space, constantly holding space in your institution, allows you the ease of access to make informed decisions.
We call that over 20 years our youth advisory. We pay them. They met every 6 to 8 weeks.
Paid, feed,
Pay and
transit.
feed.
All of
Yes.
them.
Also, because no judgment around young people as well, like we also provide like, if they had young kids as well, right? Because especially in marginalized communities, they might be young families, right? And so providing them with childcare,
Yeah.
or money for childcare, rather.
And an open door policy of come when you can, and if you can't, no
I'm
harm.
not gonna hound you.
When you don't, I'm just gonna be like, you safe, you good? Okay, we good. I haven't seen you for months, come back
Yeah.
and the door's totally open, because they feel pressured when you have consistent
Yeah.
space. So to also say, open door policy, kids' lives are just like ours, they're turbulent, and they have space when they can and space when they can't. So creating policies to make them be like, I can come once, and never again, and come back later, and they'll be there, and they'll be with pizza and bus tickets, and an honorarium, I'll still get that.
That was what I was gonna say as well, really thinking about the youth you're talking to. Because a lot of youth are left with the conversation, marginalized youth, at-risk youth, like, they're not welcome to the table because people are looking for an ideal youth, which is generally one that's had a lot more privilege than a lot of youth. And it really erases a lot of experiences and a lot of knowledge. And not trying to fit youth when you have the youth council or you have that, not trying to fit into like our weird institutional models that we're trying to navigate. I would never want to try and make a youth navigate this. Because like, let me do that terrible work. So
Here's Robert's rules.
yeah, burn them.
Yeah.
Anyone wanna take minutes? No, of
No.
course not.
Yeah. And just like really just meeting youth where they're at and just like no judgment. Where they're at is where they're at. They're still really valuable. They have great knowledge, and not trying to like force them into what we or what institutions expect youth to be or expect respectable youth to be. Yeah.
Great, well,
Follow-up question to that?
sure.
Could I get kind of a feel of the room? What is a good amount to pay your youth board?
Depends what the expectations are and the deliverables are, because sometimes, sometimes food and bus tickets and season tickets is enough. Sometimes specifically with young people who actually, so with, when I did Indigenous work, they are like, I can't come to this, I have to do childcare, I have to go to the bank, I have to take care of a kid. So for me, it would also be like, okay, those young people need a lot more. Actually, I need to pay them for their time because they're not able to go to their part-time job. So depending on the project, I would pay them full-time rates. so that they would be able to leave their part-time job. So it's like what Sam said, like knowing what the young person is giving up, knowing what their lived experiences is, and me making appropriate programming around that. If I can't pay them full year round, I can pay for a 2-month program, or I can say, can you take 3 weeks off your job? What do you get paid? I'll pay you double than that, da 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 da. So you can give some to your family, you can do whatever you want with it, but you're paying.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it has to go into your budgets.
Yeah.
Oh, no, of course, I'm just thinking about for when we're building a budget.
Yeah.
What's the random number I pull from the sky that is actually a reasonable amount to pay youth boards? Because when I do a literature review, the number is so varied, and so many of the programs are like, oh, we give them $100 at the end of an 8-week program. Why? That's more of an offense than it is a gift. Like,
Yeah.
you've just given us 8 weeks of your life and helped our institution. Here's $100 that you can do nothing with. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just curious
So I
about
think
if there's a going
For
rate.
the last I think it was a 5-week program, we gave them $2,000.
Okay,
And it was part-time, and if they had to leave for work, they could leave for work.
great.
I mean, for us, we also just became a certified living wage employer, so we're bound.
Right.
So if they're contracted to us, we pay them whatever the living wage is, which is like 22, whatever it is now. And so like when I have young facilitators, and again, because one of the way they engage is like they see our presentation, they want to get involved, and maybe after they graduate, I hire them as a contract facilitator. I pay them $25 an hour, which is like, I think, fair. And it was actually, when I started, they were actually making more than I was per hour.
I've done jobs like that where the
Yeah.
young people are making more than I am.
It's just that, and yeah.
I'm just gonna have to close it up now because it's almost 4:45, and invite you to stay and have some snacks and have a glass of wine if you want to.